These days, especially in the West, dying for what you believe seems to be nothing more than talking up a big game. It's not something that any of us have to really think about. And when it comes to people like the Founding Fathers, who, in a giant feat of courage, went against the strongest empire in the world and took a big risk on an investment that might not even really pay a return. We always kind of look up to people like that because they solidify an idea of almost the ultimate becoming of what a man should be. A man always wants to strive to be something big, something heroic. You know, when you're a kid, you aspire to do, good deeds or giant feats, climbing a tree, showing that you can withstand pain. Because deep down in every male, there's this urge to not only do what's right, but that urge for glory. And a lot of us don't really attain that anymore. And so it's almost like the feeling of hopelessness has run rampant among young men these days because they don't really have anything. They don't have anything heroic to live for. But more importantly, they have nothing heroic to die for. They don't have really a legend. And the legend, the myth that that this nation is built upon, that foundation myth, is being destroyed. I mean, you have that statue of Thomas Jefferson that was up for 187 years being taken down. So we have countless examples day after day of reasons why it seems hopeless, and why even striving to be a courageous hero, you will still be seen as a villain. And I just wanted to bring light to someone who lived in a time when he was experiencing the same levels of extremism and chaos to a further extent than we are now. And I want to commemorate this man named Jose Ramon Miguel Agustin Pro Juarez, also known as Blessed Miguel Pro. Miguel was a Jesuit priest who spent his entire life dedicating himself to trying and bringing people to the Lord, and trying in the most idealistic, altruistic way possible to push back the materialism, the ideologies that were running rampant at the time, that were, woven from the myth of materialism. Because at the time, socialism had been running rampant so much in Mexico, not only just Mexico, but the rest of the world too. But people like him would have been seen as fools, right? Because, you just don't, you just want to be oppressed, right? And these people's ideologies that they pushed away Christianity to worship things like socialism, unknowingly, they became these rebels, these angry people with hearts of war, fighting for simply to replace their earthly leaders with to replace their psychopathic earthly leaders with other psychopaths. And people like Miguel kind of stood in the face of that, saying, it doesn't matter who you make your president, who you make your leader. What matters is you being right with God, right? What matters isn't what you have, but rather what you do and what treasures you store in heaven via your good deeds done in the name of Jesus Christ. And Miguel Pro, unlike a lot of priests who probably just spend their time ministering or giving sermons and running a church, Miguel lived in a special but unfortunate era. And due to the rise of secularism and socialism that was strictly anti-Christian and anti-religious, because, Karl Marx's opiate of the masses, religion is just oppression. You need to worship the state, basically. They don't say that, but that's what they do, right? They abandon God and choose to worship something else. So under all this, you had leaders like Tomás Garrido Canaval, who were vehement atheists, anti-Christian, anti-Catholic, wanting to destroy any level of the Catholic Church's power. And it's funny because it's funny and tragic because it's always people like this who probably they have some kind of vendetta against God, or they are so swallowed up by earthly pleasures that they are willing to damn their own soul so that they can have power, so that they can have glory. Glory without God is not glory. Glory without pious virtue is not glory. It's just vanity. And when leaders like this started implementing laws that basically made priests into second-class citizens, Christians had to actually go underground because they would be killed. It harkens back to what's happening today, where they would probably have some kind of militant periphery group like Antifa come and knock down their door and beat the shit out of them or kill them. And those groups probably may or may have not been paid by some state agency or the government, somewhere in the government. All right, it's always a web of lies, and it leads endlessly to other parts of. In times of complete corruption and anarcho-tyranny, the government is just an endless cavalcade of lies and just a web of connections to other groups. It's endless. And he had to go underground. He wasn't going to let the government, during this civil war, during this time of complete chaos, stop him from preaching the word. And he wasn't calling for rebellion. He wasn't calling for violence. He was calling for peace and to worship God. And that's it. That's all he wanted to do. Well, when an attempted assassination on Álvaro Obregón, the former president of Mexico from a few years earlier, the state used this against Miguel Pro, saying that he was, trying to assassinate him and, cause anarchy, and because now Miguel was a perfect scapegoat to blame something like that, because then you can just say, oh, it was these two-timing Christians, these damn Jesuits, right? Oh yeah, they preach the word, but then they go around and kill people and try to take over the workers' revolution. Oh man. And so they captured him, threw him in prison. This man who had spent his entire life preaching the word, walking in the Spirit, walking in faith, bringing people together. He would go to like mines or places where there was just chaos and confusion, and he would try to bring that love and connection that Jesus brings to those people. Because again, at the time, it was nothing but ideological chaos between socialists and fascists, and he stood in the midst of that, just trying to bring peace. And on November 23rd, 1927, not long after he was thrown in prison and without a trial, José Ramón Miguel Agustín Pro Juárez was executed. And during the execution, during that process, they took pictures of him because the president at the time wanted to put fear into these underground, what they called the Cristero rebels, these Christians who were forced underground. And he wanted to make them scared, like, oh, look at this is what happens. And this is, the 20s, so it's not like there were too many photos of things hanging around. So when you get to see one of your leaders, someone that you look up to, murdered like a dog, it's supposed to scare you, but it didn't. It actually it energized them and invigorated them to to continue worshiping their Lord, knowing that it doesn't matter what we do. There's a man like that who's willing to kneel and pray before he dies and lift his arms as he's about to get shot and bless his enemies. And that's what happened. When he was given a last request, he kneeled and prayed, and then there's that famous picture of him where he's lifting his arms as the firing squad shoots him. And his last words were, "May God have mercy on you. May God bless you. Lord, thou knowest that I am innocent. With all my heart I forgive my enemies. Viva Cristo Rey. Long live Christ the King." And what we have to really take to heart here is, this wasn't even 100 years ago, right? This happens all the damn time in this world. In Africa, in the Middle East, it's obviously very common with Christians. But in the West, the only place that any sense of order is left, these socialists are rising to power. These people who preach against God, who want to destroy the church, who want to demoralize any enemy that could make them powerless. Because the one trend throughout history with Christians is that they're willing to take a bullet to their head with they're willing to be executed, blessing their enemy, while their enemy, his entire empire is falling because people are just not willing to recognize him as anything other than a monster. And that's what happens. See, being a Christian means not being afraid of standing for the truth. And truth is peace. Truth is the way. Truth is the life. Right? So you don't stand for violence. You don't stand for fighting. Right? What you stand for is the Lord. And in times like this, we need to be extremely aware of that, because history has shown that these socialists, these people who are completely detached from anything meaningful, their lives are nothing but chasing pleasures, as I've talked about numerous times. These are not people who are going to rationalize with you. These are not people who are going to accept you. These are people who simply want to destroy. And all that saves your soul is blessing them and being right. Because when you're right, you don't have to lift up a fist. You don't have to fucking lift up a gun. Right? You don't have to pull a trigger. So, what's important is men like this who are unafraid to kneel down and pray before they're shot in the head. Who are willing to bless their enemy, who are unafraid to stare their enemy in the eye. Like Miguel, he refused to wear a blindfold. Right? That's what you do. You don't run. You don't hide. You stand for truth. That time could be coming in the near future where you are put to the test. And maybe it won't be, obviously, being thrown in prison and being executed. But it might mean that you stop placating your enemy and you simply stare him right in the eye and you tell him the truth without any hatred in your heart. Just firm, simple, plain truth. And if it takes away certain things in your life, that's what happens, okay? Because on this planet, nothing matters other than your good deeds done in Jesus Christ's name. So, today we remember Miguel Pro, blessed Miguel Pro, and we remember that peace without God is fickle, and that the rise of this extremism is only going to destroy and cause chaos. And if you want to see change, you stand firmly for truth and firmly for peace. Because that's what we want. We want order, and you only get it with God. Thank you and God bless.